This is the Killer Innovations Podcast with Phil McKinney. Keep in mind that the information and opinions expressed in this podcast are Phil's, and Phil's alone, and they don't necessarily reflect those of his past, current, or future employers. Now, here's Phil McKinney.
Welcome to this week's podcast. We are going to pick up from where we covered last week. Last week we talked about the three elements of getting your innovation mix correct. And those three elements were organic innovation, innovation that comes from mergers and acquisitions, and co-innovation. Now this week, I'm just going to cover organic innovation. I'll cover the innovation from M&A and co-innovation in future shows. So what is it that I mean by organic innovation? Organic innovation is innovation that is 100% funded with your resources. People, time, money, contributing intellectual properties that you may already have, such as patents, trade secrets, work in progress. That's all that mix coming together to generate intellectual properties, innovations, products that you 100% control. You don't need to share it with other people. Now, everybody tends to like to grab onto organic innovation. R&D teams are very quick to grab onto organic innovation because that allows them to show off their technical expertise. Now, there are some pluses and some minuses. One of the big minuses is organic innovation is extremely high risk. You are carrying 100% of that burden. Now, the upside is, the pro, is that you do have that kind of control. You have the ability to basically create IP that you 100% control that gives you some form of unique market or competitive advantage. Now, to really take advantage of organic innovation is you got to think strategically about where do you make the right investments and over what time frame. When will you get the return from those investments to have ultimate impact back to your organization? So where, what I would call the areas of focus, and when, the timeline, or what I refer to as the innovation funnel. If I make a certain amount of investment, when do I get that money back? So, areas of innovation focus. I break it down really into a third. A third of the innovations that you're focusing in on are just kind of the natural next steps. The things that are in your core that make sense, that you just have to continue to drive organic investment in an attempt to try to create some form of competitive advantage or some barrier for your competitors to come in and try to compete. So about a third of it should be in right up next to the products and IP that you're working on. So an extension to a patent or unique feature sets that you can bind into a new product based on your core capabilities in order to try to create barriers for others to be able to come in and compete. The next third, really what I refer to as extensions. Now, in your core business, you know what you know, right? You know that in your gut, you know your business, you know your customers, you know your operation. Now, there's a segment of that says, you know what you don't know. You know that there's some areas of possibilities out there, but you've never gone there. You've never investigated them. About a third of the focus area should be starting to push into those areas where you've never stepped into. Now, you kind of know that those are interesting areas, but you just have never done it. And you need to step out there and try to push kind of into those areas that you know would be potentially rich areas for innovation, but you just never have gone there. And then the last third is what I would call pure discovery. It's the you don't know what you don't know area. You're not sure where the ideas are going to come from. And in fact, in this case, you got to let for a little investigation, a little bit of experimentation. You got to kind of step out there and go into areas that you would just have never even considered. So again, in the case of the organic innovations, about a third of it is in the core, right up next to your current products. About a third is into these areas of extensions, meaning areas that you know would be interesting, but you just never have committed the time and the resources. And then about a third is pure discovery. You're out there really pushing to see where those boundaries are at. Now, don't take this as a third of the budget. What I'm talking about is a third of the programs. You have to get comfortable as to how much dollars you're going to put into each one of these. But when I look at total number of projects that are in the core tend to be a little bit bigger projects because you have a little bit higher assurance that they're going to be successful, and I have less dollars. But as far as total number of investigations going on, you need to have a volume of investigations because, as you look across that, the risk mix changes. Now, beyond the focus, you have to think about the innovation funnel, timing. If you put a certain amount of investment in, when are you going to get the payback? So, near term, in the case of, the PC business, investments that I make that are on a path to return in 18 months have a pretty high level of assurance that they're going to come through and be successful because you've done all the planning. You're ready to make those investments. When the timeline gets close, the level of insurance goes high. Same thing as midterm, 2 to 3 years out. Yeah, there's some risk, but you can kind of see the path. Long term, 5, 6, 7 years out, man, you're rolling the dice. You're making some long-term bets. So, again, when you look at a combination of the focus and a combination of the funnel, those two mixes allow you then to kind of tune in to the risk profile that you're comfortable with. Now, here's my one word of warning. A lot of organizations will focus all of their projects on the core, and they'll focus them all on the short term, right? That reduces the risk. It eliminates any form of upside potential because that's what all of your competitors are doing. All of your competitors are betting on right in the core product that you have today, and they're betting on everything in the next 12, 24, maybe 36 months, depending on the industry you're in. It's this ability to look at core, extensions, and pure discovery across the timeline. It is near term, midterm, and long term. And with the right set of mix across all those components, you can dial in the risk, but don't ignore one of them. Don't bet everything to be near term, and don't do any pure discovery programs. Now, organic innovation really has a couple of key, I don't know what I would call it, elements or components or the right ecosystem that really defines it for success. In the case of organic innovation, it's got to be built on something. You've got to have some form of expertise, right? You have to have a contribution to make. Going off, and if you have a boatload of cash and going off into a completely orthogonal innovation in the form of doing that organically makes no sense. The opportunity for success drops significantly. If you want to get into totally new areas, that's where alternative options such as M&A or co-innovation makes sense, and we'll cover that in upcoming podcasts. So for organic, it's got to be about a contribution to make. You have to have some expertise. You need some IP that you're going to build upon, whether that's patents, people with certain expertise in the organization, history in the industry space, something. You need to also make sure that what you're working on is aligned with your customer, the who, in the nomenclature that I use in the book Beyond the Obvious. Who is the customer? Who is it that gives you money or something in return for the value you deliver? All of your innovation programs need to be aligned with the who. Now, doesn't mean the who today, doesn't mean your customers today, but you've got to make sure you understand that what is it you're innovating and what problem are you solving. Customers don't buy products or technology. They buy solutions to their problems. And the key point there is that you've got to get the timeline to match. As I talked before, near-term, mid-term, or long-term innovation funnels, you need to make sure that the innovation that you're working on is aligned to a customer need that's going to exist at the time that the innovation comes through. So if you're doing, a real long-range discovery, and it's going to be 3 years out, what problem are you solving? What problem is the customer going to have? What does the customer segment look like then? So you need to make sure that if you're going to do organic, you have the expertise, you got the IP to build upon, you've got the alignment with your customer or your who, and that the timelines all match. If you don't have all of these, then organic may not be the best choice, right? If all of a sudden you've got a customer problem that's going to crop up in a year from now. But when you go through and you look at your organic innovation programs, and your organic innovation program says it's going to be 3 years before you can deliver this solution, guess what? Organic may not be the option. You may need to go out and acquire somebody to fill that gap. The whole purpose of organic innovation is to get out far enough in the planning cycle such that when your innovations are coming close, meaning they're about ready to be delivered, they align with when the needs of the customers emerge. If you wait until the problem exists in today's customers, meaning your customers need the problem today, and you have nothing in your organic innovation funnel, don't rush and try to start a program organically. You need to be creative and look at other alternatives, such as acquiring, whether that's full out acquiring a company that's got a solution to the gap you have, or acquiring patents and intellectual properties, acquiring rights to a product, not an entire company. There's lots of ways to do it on M&A. Likewise, co-innovate. Bring together one or two other players that are key components to solving the immediate customer problems that allows you to accelerate. Rather than taking 3 years to develop the innovation, can you co-innovate and do it in a year? So again, what I'm trying to get across to you here is that when you're thinking about organic innovation, you got to have that expertise. You got to have the IP to build upon. You got to understand the customer segment and the problem that you're going to address, and the timing has to match. Timing has to match. If you don't have all of those things, then, like I said before, organic innovation may not be the right choice. And as I talked about in last week's podcast, getting the mix right. How much of your innovation programs are in organic? How much of your innovation comes from M&A? And how much of your innovation comes from co-innovation? Getting that mix right, depending on your company, your industry, the competitive nature of your market, will allow you to drive a very highly successful overall innovation program within your organization. If you get it wrong and you focus, for instance, 100% on organic, you tend to get a culture of NIH, not invented here. Any attempt to bring an innovation in from the outside, whether that's an M&A or a small startup that has an interesting little piece that potentially could be very helpful to your programs, the culture will reject it because you built an entire culture around organic only. By defining the mix correctly, you teach your organization to avoid that NIH culture. So, again, this week we're just focusing on organic. Over the next coming weeks, I'll cover M&A and co-innovation in more detail. And with that, I want to thank you for your time out of your busy schedule to listen to the podcast. Before we go, I did want to remind you, the book is out. Beyond the Obvious, Killer Questions That Spark Game-Changing Innovation is now available in bookstores worldwide. It's also available from all of the online bookstores, and you can get it in ebook, hardback, or audio. If you've read the book, I truly would appreciate if you'd go back online and post your comments and reviews. If you have any questions about the book or questions about this podcast, or if there's a particular topic you would like for me to cover in future podcasts, send that email to feedback@philmckinney.com, or you can visit the philmckinney.com site and just simply hit the contact tab up at the top. Also, subscribe to the podcast. There's going to be a whole series of these that are all linked together, so you want to make sure you're subscribed. So go over to iTunes and subscribe, or if you're using any kind of other podcast catcher, make sure you've subscribed. And the other point is tell others. If you've been a long-time listener to the podcast, you know the background. If not, the podcast was started 6 years ago. It's basically in response to really a promise that I had made to a longtime mentor when I asked that mentor, how could I pay it back? How could I pay back all the time he put into my career to help me get started right out of college? And his point was you can't pay it back. What I needed to do is pay it forward. And so this podcast and the fact that I license all the podcast material under Creative Commons non-commercial for you to use and share with your coworkers or your management teams is a way for me to pay it forward. All I ask is that you tell others. So tell others about the podcast, tell others about the book, and help spread the word. With that, again, I want to thank you for all the time that you've taken out of your week to listen to the podcast. Again, if you have questions, drop me an email or connect with me on LinkedIn, Facebook, any of the social networks, Twitter, and you can find all the links to that over on the website at philmckinney.com. With that, have a great week. Keep innovating. We'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.